Hi, this is Nick from Nick's Handmade Crochet, and today I just wanted to do a little tutorial on starting a chain and then teaching you how to do double crochet. So there's a couple of basic stitches that you will use frequently, and one of them being a single crochet and the other one being a double crochet. So I did a little tutorial the other day on starting a chain and practicing with just doing single crochets. So today I want to do starting a chain and doing double crochets. And a double crochet is about twice the height of a single crochet, so your project will work up a bit quicker. So it is a bit more intricate than a single crochet, but let's get going. So I'm just using a wool acrylic mix, and it's probably equivalent to about a 10 ply. It's some yarn from Spotlight. It's quite soft and it's not too furry with the wool blend in it, so it shouldn't be obstructive for the tutorial. I'm hoping, fingers crossed. Alright, so you need your hook. I'm using my 5mm hook. I'm using the yarn as discussed, and you will need a couple of stitch markers which you can pick up at most craft stores, and you'll get them in a packet, because you'll probably need a few. Like me, they end up on the floor and up the vacuum, so it's always good to have a few spare. Alright, so enough with the jibber jabber. So let's do a slip knot. So that's just winding our yarn around our fingers. The yarn tail, the bit that we're not going to use, is to my left. The working yarn I've wrapped around my finger. I'm just putting my hook under the loop I've made and grabbing that loose piece of yarn. And I'm just pulling from the yarn tail or from the working yarn, either end, just to make a knot. So that's just how we get our yarn on our hook. Alright, I'm just going to check the sound because I did a whole tutorial and the sound dropped out, so just bear with me. Okay, let's continue. The sound's not going to be great because for some reason my microphone just kept dropping out, so I'm just going to be using the sound off the phone. So we've put our slip knot, our slip stitch, onto our hook, and we're going to get started. So the yarn that we're working down, obviously called the working yarn, and that's attached to our ball, and you will need some length. So you'll see my hand sort of going across like that, or as I'm pulling the yarn off the ball, which you will do frequently through your crocheting as well. So we're going to do a chain. So the chain is the base row to get started on any project. If you're going in rows back and forth, and you do use chains for other things. So it's the basic method of starting a project. So we have our yarn on our hook, and we're just going to bring our yarn over the hook. So in actual fact, you're taking your hook down under the yarn, but you'll always hear it described as yarn over. So bring the yarn over your hook. We're going to swivel a little bit, and we're just going to grab the yarn with our hook, and we're going to pull it through that first loop which was made with our slip stitch. So we're going to continue that method for as many stitches as we require. So we have one loop on our hook. We're going to bring the yarn over, so we just tilt our hook under that piece of yarn. We're going to grab the yarn, we're going to tilt our hook down just so we can get through that space without it getting caught here. So if you just tilt it, you'll get that through. That's 2 chains. So again, grab your yarn, so the yarn over the hook so you can grab it, bring that through, yarn over, bring that yarn through, yarn over, or hook under, whatever makes you remember what you're doing. So the yarn comes over the hook, you grab it, you twist it slightly just so you can bring your hook through that space. And we're going to try and keep even tension and even as best we can. So try not to hold on to pull this way too tight. Just have it loosely over your finger. Not so loose as that you have big chains like that. If you're getting that, then you've got too much yarn pulled up. And if you don't have enough yarn, it'll be super tight. So you're just trying to make little even chain stitches so that you can work back into those on our way back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to continue. I want 22 on my hook just for this example. So we're going to hold on to our chains with our fingers as we work up. Yarn over, grab, twist, pull through that loop, and that's a chain. So we're going to continue that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, So you can try and count as you go. I always lose count. I'll start thinking of something else and I'll in my head while I'm doing that and I'll forget. So if you want to go back and just check how many you've got, I'm just pulling up that loop so I don't unravel the work I've just done. And if you need to put in a stitch marker just so that doesn't get all pulled through and ruin all the work you've done, use your stitch marker. Okay, let's check. So from this angle, I want to count my stitches, so I can count them either from this way and count each chain, and if you find that difficult you can just slightly tilt it and just count the top of that stitch. 1, 2, 3. I'll show you this way. 1, 2, 3. So whatever way you can see the stitch for the first time, you do it that way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. I've gotten more than what I wanted. 21, 22. So if I want to have 20 stitches on my work and I'm doing double crochet, for the first setup I want to have an extra 2, and I'll explain that so in a minute. So I have got 22 chain stitches. I'm putting my hook back in. Make sure the working yarn is over this side of my hook. So what we're going to do now is we're going to skip a couple of chains to do our first stitch, and this usually occurs only when you're doing your very first setup for your first row and you've done your chain. So the yarn on my hook, even though that's a stitch, it's not counted in my stitch count for my row. I'm going to, so that's not counted even though it looks like a stitch, it is a stitch, but I'm not counting this one. I need to skip that first one where my yarn is coming through, and I need to skip this one as well. So I'm going back to where number 20 was. That's 21, 22. So a bit of dexterity needed, and you're going to, with your hook, you're going to bring your hook under the yarn, so you're yarning over. You're then going to put your hook through the identified stitch, so that's number 20 of our chains. You're going to swivel your hook, you're going to grab your yarn, and you're going to pull that through. Now you will have 3 pieces of yarn or stitches on your hook. We are now going to grab our yarn with our hook, and we're going to pull that through. So rotate your hook so you can get that hook through, and we're going to go through 2 stitches, and we're going to have 2 stitches left on our hook, and we're going to grab that yarn and we're going to pull that through again. So there we have our first double crochet. And what I'm going to do now, again, a bit of dexterity, holding everything, I'm going to get my stitch marker, and I am going to put my stitch marker under these 2 loops here. So not the one on my hook, but this one just below it. It's a little V, and I'm going to place my stitch marker there because that's the top of the first double crochet. So let's look where we're going to put the next stitch. So we're holding on to our chain, and I know I've done a stitch into here because that stitch is being pulled up by all this yarn, and I'm going to just wiggle across to here. There's another piece of yarn, that's one side of the chain, the top of the chain, and then there's going to be a space, so I need to go in there. So I'm going to yarn over, remember that's putting your hook under it, but yarning over, and so that makes 1, 2 stitches on my hook there, and I'm going to go into that space, and I'm going to swivel to grab, and I'm going to bring that through, and I have 3 stitches on my hook. I'm going to swivel and grab my working yarn there, and I'm going to turn and just bring that through for 2 stitches. Grab that, bring that through 2 stitches, and that's a double crochet. It's like doing 2 stitches on top of each other, and that makes a post, and that's a double crochet. So we need to keep going to the length of our chain to set up our first row. So I don't want to go back into that space, I need to go back into the next one. So we're going to yarn over, bring the yarn over the hook, direct it down under that first piece of yarn there, through the hole, through that space, grab, bring that through, and we have 3 loops in our hook, and that was the chain we've gone through. We're going to grab our yarn, swivel our hook again, bring that through 2, bring that through 2, and this is the pattern all the way down the length of our chain till we get to the end. So we have 1, 2, 3, and that's a post, that's the double crochet, and our stitches look like this from the top. Just move my hook. So 1, 2, 3, and they're like little V's. There's a front part of the V and the back part, and when we're doing stitches we want to go through so that our hook goes under both those parts of yarn, under that stitch, to create the next stitch that we're doing. And from the side, if you're looking from the side, it's sometimes harder to identify where you're going to put your hook, so you can just keep doing that flipping. Alright, so let's get back to doing some more double crochet. So I've already done a stitch into that chain, so I want to go across to the next one. I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to place my hook under that piece of yarn through the center of that chain, grab my yarn, swivel so I can bring it through. I'm going to swivel and grab that yarn, bring that through too. Grab my yarn and bring that through again, and that's a double crochet. So I'll meet you up when I get to the end, and I'll show you how we finish our very first row of double crochet. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our very first row of double crochets, and I have 2 stitches left, 2 chains to make double crochets into. So I'm going to yarn over, continue what we've been doing into that chain. We come to the end, and I know I have 1 left. There's the knot from where we did the initial slip knot. So I'm going to finish off there. I'm going to turn my work over. So I have my yarn tail out this side now, and my stitch marker where we put that in the very first stitch of the row. Make sure that you've got your 20 stitches by counting the tops of all your V's. Alright, so we're going to chain up so we can go up a level to go back to make our second row. So chaining 1, 2, 3, and I want to put a stitch marker in. So 1, 2, 3, and I'm just doing this, and it looks awkward with my hook still in, just so you can see where I'm putting the stitch marker, and realizing that when you're chaining up 3, it does hang off to, it is on the side more than the top, so that's why that stitch marker is so important. So we're going to continue back the other way. We've gone up 3. That in essence is going to be counted as our first double crochet. So you'll quite often hear that chain 3 counts as your first stitch, or chain 2 counts as your first stitch, which means that you're going to chain 3. You're not going to go into where you think the first stitch is, because that is your first stitch. We're going to go into the next one. So double crochets make these posts or lengths because they're 2 stitches on top of each other, and we want to go into the next stitch, and if we flick our work we can see that's where that is. Now it can be confusing if you're counting, because you've got all these V's along the top as well, but you remember you've chained up 3, so you've got 1, 2, 3. That's the stitch that we came out of. That's the last stitch we did on the previous row. So we want to go into the next one. So we're going to yarn over. We're going to go into that stitch. So when I say go into the stitch, we go under the V's, through that space here, directly under where those V's are. Grab our yarn, pull it through, bring that through 2 loops, bring that through 2 loops, find the next stitch over, make sure we don't go back into the same hole, find the next stitch, yarn over, go into that space under those 2 loops there, grab our yarn, bring it through, bring through 2, bring through 2. And again, yarn over, go into the hole, pull that yarn through the back through the hole, yarning over, bring through 2 loops, yarning over, bring through 2. So we can see that, I'll just move this for a minute, can see that we're making our stitches and the look of them on this row. There's our first one, which is always a bit wonky. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you look at the top of those, we have the same as here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this is known as the back of the work. This is the front. The very first row is usually the front, and the even rows coming back are on the back. And you might have to tilt your work even a little bit further around. When we're going this way, we can see them quite easily. They're a bit more identifiable. When we flip our work, they've rolled over a little bit towards the other side, and that's why being able to identify your stitches just by these V's is really helpful. Okay, so we're just going to continue on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and just continue that all the way to the end, and I'll catch you up at the other end. Okay, sorry, my phone died and cut off the last word. So just continue from where we were to the end, and I'm at the end of this second row, and I have 2 more stitches to go. So I'm going to do a double crochet into here, and then this is where we put the stitch marker at the beginning of the row on this side. And again, you can see it's a bit hard to see if you didn't have the stitch marker. So I'm going to pop that out. And yarn over and go in, and I do have to turn to see that V which is on its side. So that's my double crochet there. All right, let's turn and chain up 3. I'll do one more row with you. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Pop my stitch marker in. If you find it a bit difficult with the hook still in, you can wait till you've done the next or the first double crochet that we're actually doing, which will be the second stitch of the row, and then put it in. I'm just doing it this way so you can see where it goes and how that stitch looks when you're chaining up 3, and it looks like it's on the side. All right, so that was the chains, 1, 2, 3, which came out of that last stitch we did. So we're not going to go in there. We're going to go above this second post, and it meets the top of that stitch here. So our mantra is through the hole, grab the yarn, bring it back through the hole, 3 stitches on your hook, bring it through 2, bring it through 2, and we will continue doing that. So if you can master the chain 3 and getting your stitch marker in, and then maintaining your 20 stitches along, and after a couple of rows, you've done well. All right, so we just continue that, and just use up your whole ball of yarn that you have. And there we're going, just rhythmically, stitch after stitch, to grow our work. And that's pretty much it. But it does take practice to keep the tension right, your stitch count right. And I think that's all the tips I have for you with that. And apologies for the sound. It's really wet and rainy here. There's cars whooshing by. Anyway, good luck with that. Any issues, send me a message via YouTube. And happy crocheting. Bye for now. Okay, I was just finishing off that tutorial for learning to do a chain and then doing double crochet. And I thought I'd just work up a few more rows for myself as a swatch. And I wanted to point out that the sides, by chaining up 3 and turning, or turning and chaining up 3, your work on one side might look a bit wonky like that. And it looks like a bit of a gapey space here. So once you finish practicing doing some of your double crochets, chaining up, turning, identifying where your stitches are, you can progress to neater ways of going up and doing other ways of creating that stitch. One of them is actually chaining up. I'll just go back to here. Chaining up and then actually going back into that stitch. So we've chained up and we're actually going back into that stitch that I told you to miss. Now, if you can keep that way of doing it consistently all the way throughout your crochet project, you won't have this little bit of wonky, wiggly, wobbly edges. After, you know, I mean, maybe if you wash it, and we call blocking, and you dampen it and you make sure that it's all aligned, it might not be so bad. But don't get disheartened about this sort of look just to start. I don't want to discourage you and you think, oh, well, it's just not working. It will. It's just that I think the chain 3 up method, so you can practice using your hook, your yarn, your tension, and identifying where that end stitch is before you go doing other forms. That's the reason behind it. So there's lots and lots and lots of tutorials, so I'm not expecting you to follow mine and follow that way. I just want to give you an idea of what stitches look like and how you find them and how you get your stitch markers in. So that is the reason for this quick little update from that video. Okay, happy crocheting. Bye.